Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Devin with Jurassic Magic, and I thought to myself, the Temur Precon has so many dragons in it, it doesn't really have the Temur identity. And what I do mean by that is the fact that the Temur were nomads traversing the wilderness, and they focused on creatures with huge power. So in today's video, I'm going to be making a deck based off of the Temur clan in its past with Khans of Tarkir mixed in with today's version of Temur. And obviously the one to helm this deck is Eshki, Temur's Roar. But before I do get into the video, I did want to give a couple shout outs. If you want to support the channel, consider joining my Patreon. And if you're looking for any of these cards today that I talk about, check out my TCG player affiliate link. And if you want to join a great community, come by in my Discord, where there's a great community talking about all sorts of things Magic related. So definitely come by and check it out. But going back into the video, I just wanted to focus on the true sense of what the Temur is without necessarily all the dragons. And so now with that said, let's get it started. Let's talk about Eshki, Temur's Roar. So first, let's read the commander. For 1 green, blue, and a red, so 3 mana total for a legendary creature, human warrior. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Eshki. If that spell's power is 4 or greater, draw a card. If that spell's power is 6 or greater, Eshki deals damage equal to Eshki's power to each opponent. So in a weird way, without the haste, this feels like Temur Ascendancy, which obviously could be in the deck too, where you're focusing on a Powers Matter deck. And just to kind of give you a brief summary of what this video is going to be about, I'm going to first focus on synergy with Eshki, casting creature spells. I'm also going to focus on the Temur clan itself, talking about some of the old and some of the new cards that you could add into this deck to really make it feel like the true Temur clan it once was. And then later on, I'll be discussing some win cons. So now with that said, let's get started first with Eshki and talking about some of the synergies that are with her. So in this deck, we want to cast creatures with huge power. It doesn't necessarily matter so much about the mana cost. One card I do think about is Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. This is technically 3 mana, but it has a 6 power, which will help trigger all 3 modes of Eshki's ability. Also, what's very good about Uro's ability is the fact that you get to draw a card, put a land on the battlefield, and gain some life. And of course, you can escape it from the graveyard to do it all over again. This is a great fit in the deck either way, because it's cheap, effective, and it gets the job done. Another card I like in this deck is Outcaster Trailblazer. For 2 and a green, when it enters the battlefield, add 1 mana of any color. Also, whenever another creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you draw a card. It also has the plot mechanic by paying 2 and a green, and a lot of people probably think, why would I want to do this when I clearly can just cast it? Well, there's some situations where you may want to hold off on this and get a bigger turn out of it. Let's just say you plot it and the next turn you cast it for free, you get 1 additional mana to cast a huge creature. There may be other situations where you may want to cast a board wipe, so this being in the exile zone would be a lot better than being on the battlefield. So those are some great value pieces. There are some other value pieces that I wanted to highlight. Gwenna, Eyes of Gaia is incredible in this deck because it's a mana dork for 2 mana. You can only cast creature spells, but that's all we really want to be doing. And if we cast a creature with power 5 or greater, we get to put a +1/+1 counter on Gwenna and untap it so that later on we can tap it again for 2 mana to cast another big creature. Another mana dork that is incredible in this deck is Fanatic of Ronis, mainly because it has the Ferocious ability. You can add 1 green mana, or if you have the Ferocious online, you can tap for 4 green mana. Obviously, it's based off if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, but again, it's probably very easy to do in this type of deck. And you could also eternalize it from the graveyard, so it enters as a 4/4, so you can just tap for 4 mana. This is just a great mana dork. Similar to that one, but kind of not really, is Arithmesis, Lumbering Isle. This can be a great option in your deck as far as ramp goes, because when you're casting it on the stack, this will trigger all 3 modes of your commander. But when it enters the battlefield, it will have 5 slumber counters on it, and as long as it has a slumber counter on it, it's basically a land, and it will enter the battlefield tapped. But it's basically just a mana dork adding 2 mana, all the while triggering your commander on the stack. Another card that could be very notable in this deck would be Kruga the Macrosage. You can actually use this as a companion in the deck. Obviously, you can't have anything 2 CMC or less in the deck like Fanatic of Ronis, but I feel like in the 99, it's as well justified because it's a great card draw engine. So all these type of things do synergize with our commander, because the more CMC our creatures have, the more we can benefit off of them, and the more options we do have of ramping and card draw can get us there even further. But I wanted to focus more more on the Temur theme, power 4 or greater, or otherwise other effects like that. The perfect example that encapsulates this entire subject is Temur Ascendancy. I already previously mentioned it. Creatures you control have haste, and whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, you may draw a card. This is exactly what we want to be doing. We have big creatures we want to cast, and having them getting haste and getting us more card draw is going to be a very viable option. Another option to consider is Goreclaw, Terror of Kalsima, and I don't know too much about the lore with this card. All I know, it is from Tarkir, and honestly it looks like it could be within the area of the Temur. However, I feel like it works well with the Temur because creature spells you cast with power 4 or greater cost 2 less to cast, and not only that, when it does attack, each creature you control with power 4 or greater gets a +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. Some creatures that have power 4 or greater in this deck might not have trample. This will help us push through for some damage. There is another version of Goreclaw with Surrak and Goreclaw. This is also another excellent card on the deck. Of course, Surrak, I believe, was one of the Dragon Claws of the Temur previously. But either way, this is a great option in the deck because it has trample, and other creatures you control have trample statically. And whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until end of turn. This is everything we want to be doing in the Temur clan. We want to have trample, and we want to have them swing in right away with haste and also buffing itself up. There are some new cards from the set. Temur Battlecrier is probably one of the best options you could throw in this deck. During your turn, spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. So already your creatures will be reduced by 1 because its power is a 4/3. This is just, again, everything you want to be doing in Temur, reducing the spells of your big creatures, and it's any kind of spell, so it's instant sorceries, artifacts, enchantments, you name it. Another card I wanted to throw in from the new set is Thundermane Dragon, and I know I said I wasn't going to put any dragons in this deck, but this is too good to pass up because it focuses on the power 4 or greater aspect. It has flying, and you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may cast creature spells with power 4 or greater from the top of your library. If you cast a creature spell this way, it gains haste till end of turn. Again, it's focusing on the power 4 or greater along with giving creatures haste, and honestly, looking at the top card of your library at any time is honestly very valuable. Also, most likely, you're going to have a ton of lands in the deck that you want to ramp out as quickly as possible. So that's why I thought to include Dragonback Assault. This is incredible in the deck because it acts as a board wipe, dealing 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, but not only that, it has landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 4/4 red dragon creature token with flying, and this is another situation where I'm like, yes, of course it's another dragon engine, but trust me, this is just the last one because we're going to be ramping so much in this deck based off of the amount of huge creatures we want to cast. Why not get some extra incentive by getting extra landfall triggers? Because we'll have a lot of incentive of having a lot of 4/4s or any creature with power 4 or greater on the battlefield to draw a bunch of cards. Which does bring me to my next card, Shamanic Revelation, which is also from Tarkir. Draw a card for each creature you control, and it has Ferocious. You gain 4 life for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. This is great, especially if you have so many 4/4 dragons on the battlefield. And not only that, we're going to have a lot of creatures with power 4 or greater, obviously. In a general sense, we have creatures, we get to draw cards, but if we have a ton of creatures with power 4 or greater on the battlefield, we could gain 4 life for each of them. That could be huge. There are also a lot of other Temur-inspired cards in this deck. I do have a deck list down below in the description if you want to go check it out for yourself, but I want to pick out one more Temur clan member, and this one is actually the reason why I wanted to make this deck. Shaman of the Great Hunt is actually a card I played as a secret commander for a little bit, and I feel like overall it is very fun and enjoyable. For 3 and a red, it's a creature orc shaman with haste. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And it has the Ferocious ability. You pay 2 and 2 Simic Hybrid. Draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. I just remember seeing this all the way back in the day, around 2015, and I thought to myself, this is a really neat card. I love the design of this. It's pretty aggressive with haste, so I can swing in right away. As a power and toughness of 4/2, and you get to draw cards and get to buff up creatures. What's not to love about it? And this totally exemplifies what Temur is about, and so I had to include it on the list. This is definitely the main inspiration of this entire deck. But now I wanted to focus on some win cons of the deck, and in a general sense, it seems like, based off of what I've talked about previously, there's going to be a ton of card draw in the deck. Become the Avalanche is going to be a great win con. For 4 and 2 green, draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, which is probably going to be a ton by the way. Then creatures you control get +X/+X until in a turn where X is the number of cards in your hand. So if you have like 5 cards, each creature is going to get +5/+5. And not only that, that's why I wanted to put cards that give trample like Goreclaw or Surak and Goreclaw, so that way you could trample in for some damage and not get chump blocked with Become the Avalanche. Another interesting win con that you could throw in this deck that is Temur inspired is Roar of the Endless Song. I actually like this a lot. It's a great saga for 2 green, blue, and red, so 5 mana total. It has 3 different modes. The first 2 modes creates a 5/5 green elephant creature token, and in the third mode, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until in a turn. And of course, if your creatures have trample, this could definitely close out the game. You're making 2 elephants, going a little bit more wide with a creature's power 4 or greater, and then doubling them and doubling all your other creatures can potentially close out the game. Another card that would be pretty similar to this card is Unnatural Growth for 5 mana with 4 green pips, so it can be a little costly in that aspect, but at the beginning of each combat, double the power and toughness of each creature you control until in a turn. This can be huge, another game winner on the right type of board state. Also, in a weird way, Craterhoof Behemoth is in this set, and it is Temur inspired, being an elephant, even though technically it's a beast, but this can be another win con in your deck because you're going wide with a lot of 4/4s or greater. This could absolutely take advantage of the fact of overrunning your opponents, giving each creature trample and +X/+X until on a turn depending on how much creatures you have. I know it's a boring win con, but because now it's Temur inspired, I thought I had to include it in the list. But now that is going to do it for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and watching this video on Eshki Temur's Roar and essentially what the Temur clan really is outside of the dragons. Let me know down below in the comments, what are your thoughts and opinions? Do you plan on building this deck yourself? What other cards would you put in this deck? Also, if you can, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And with that out of the way, thank you for stopping by.